How do you create a lasting and good relationship? I will talk about the typical approach to relationships of most people, about how your perception of relationships, your partner's love, and your own self-view affects the relationship, about what a good relationship looks like and what you should take care of to create such a relationship in your life. I think for the most part we have an unrealistic approach to relationships influenced by romantic movies and romantic songs. Our culture gives us a pattern of relationships that has nothing to do with how things should really be. In that, it has a lot to do with desperation and mutual dependence. You only have to try once to build a relationship, as the characters in the movies do, only to realize that it can't work for several reasons. There is a reason why most romantic movies end with the wedding, and rarely does one seem to anticipate what comes after the wedding. But what comes after, combined with how it all begins, determines whether or not a relationship survives. Completely different things are important at the beginning of a relationship, and completely different things become important over time, and a combination of both guarantees a good relationship. But what does it look like in the movies? Mostly two people experience that magical moment of falling in love. They look into each other's eyes and everything becomes obvious. Some mystical, mysterious force that grows between them, draws them to each other and they can't resist it in any way. There is not a peril of logic in it. There is no thinking. This feeling is so strong between them that they understand each other without words on a spiritual level. They instantly complement each other, and just as they were unhappy before, they now suddenly feel that nothing can go wrong. But what would a movie be if there was no crisis? That's why something usually gets complicated in the film. But this mystical force eventually brings them back together, and they are together again in a while. That is, everything here is based on the characters coming together, and then somehow it will happen. There is another scenario. One is in love with the other, and the former, using all kinds of means, tries to convince the latter to fall too. Often it is the man who does everything he can to win the woman's affection. In the end, she actually somehow becomes conscious and notices him. And then they live happily ever after. At least at the wedding, it looks like that. I'll say this much, don't do it like in the movies. I want to supplement these scenarios with what they don't usually show us in the movies, that is, the outcome of a beginning like that. After some time in such a relationship, you begin to see more and more flaws in your partner. You see clearly that the partner is not perfect at all. Hardly at all does he meet your expectations or satisfy your needs. Nor does he read your mind at all, regardless of your soul connection. Over time, you will also notice that you are not at all happier than you were before you entered this relationship. That's because, at a deeper level, nothing has actually changed, and it's starting to become obvious that more is needed. That everything you hoped for from this relationship is not quite what it was supposed to be in your mind after watching all those romantic movies. At this stage, after what might seem like a beautiful, proper beginning, things start to get less pleasant. You finally have your own needs. The person you are with does not meet your expectations. This is what makes you want to steer your partner in the direction of what your vision of the relationship should be. Of course, we don't do this through normal communication, because after all, if someone loves you, they should understand what you mean without words. You have that mystical soul connection after all. Therefore, instead of talking, you start walking around angry, offended, frustrated, and it seems to you that the other person knows what you're about and doesn't meet these expectations on purpose, maliciously, or is just stupid and doesn't see them. This begins a phase of the relationship where communication is important, making it clear that having a partner is not the be-all and end-all. It is just the beginning, and skills are needed that most people unfortunately do not have. Viewing relationships in this way, typical in our culture, is like a virus. It destroys relationships and causes unnecessary suffering to both partners. The point is that these real, long-lasting relationships are not built this way. If you approach your relationship the way it is shown in the movies, the only thing you will achieve is disappointment over time. But maybe, despite a few painful experiences, you still believe that this is how it's supposed to be, and that maybe you haven't met the right partner yet. This attitude will not lead you to a good, lasting relationship. It will lead you to a dysfunctional relationship. In short, movies are fun, but don't try it in real life. To create a really good, lasting relationship, you'll have to forget some of the most common myths that circulate around relationships, around love, the ideal partner, and yourself, i.e., your role in all of this. It's about changing your approach to these things and understanding what's going on here. By change of perspective, I use the word understanding for a reason. Let's take a look at some common myths about relationships, which we all believe to some degree thanks to our culture, which has this instilled in us such rather than other ideas about these things. What are the most common myths when it comes to how we approach relationships, love, the ideal partner, and ourselves in terms of building lasting relationships? The first myth is that we need some kind of complement, because we ourselves are incomplete and become whole only after we find that perfect partner, that other half that fits us perfectly. This is a very dangerous way to view yourself and the relationship, as this approach will lead to interdependence rather than love. When you think you have found that other, perfectly fitting half of the apple, what will happen when that person starts to move away from you? There will be a fear that you might lose this person. And after all, if she is perfect for you, you are lost for the rest of your life if your partner leaves, because you won't find another such perfect half again. After all, this half is perfect. Fear will cause you to start doing unwise things. There will be desperation, control will appear, jealousy, anger, some resentment, and all this will be caused by the fear that you will lose this person. You can be sure that this will happen, mainly because of your behavior under the influence of this fear. Just this one thing, the belief that you are incomplete and somewhere there is someone who will complete you, spoils more relationships than anything else. But because we are constantly infected with this approach to relationships, and from childhood, we believe that this is the way it should be. It's hard to get anything further from the truth. The truth is that you are not incomplete. You are not a product. This is the biggest lie about relationships. You are not missing anything here. Creating a relationship is not about looking and finding the other half of the apple, because the apple in you is complete. The second myth is that a relationship will make you happy. A relationship by itself will not make you happy, unless you were happy before your partner came into your life. If you are counting on your partner to make you happy, you are unfortunately in for a disappointment. Over time, as the relationship lasts, you will see that this is not feasible and you will feel disappointed. The whole point of building a relationship is to connect two people who feel complete and are doing great on their own. Bringing them together not only brings two full and complete apples together, but a new quality is created. The idea is to create a synergy between them, something like apple pie, but without sacrificing whole apples for it. No one wants to be responsible for another person's happiness. It's just too much, and in addition, it's impossible. No one can make you happy except yourself. After some time in such a relationship, when that initial excitement fades, you will return to your unhappy self again. I'll say it again. You cannot make the other person happy, and the other person cannot make you happy. It is simply impossible. The third myth goes like this. Building relationships is a simple thing, something spontaneous and natural. If you approach relationships in a so-called natural way and believe that you know what it's all about, just because you were born human, you are really quite wrong. Building relationships requires study, hard work, understanding and knowledge of your psychology and the psychology of the opposite sex. You need to know how your gender works, what its needs are, and how the opposite gender is different. We are all a mix of both, but by understanding these differences, you will be able to observe how these differences carry over into your relationship. Understand each other better and apply the knowledge to help improve your relationship in everyday life. The same situation can look completely different for your partner and for you because of these psychological differences, so it is worth knowing them. Knowing these things is not natural at all. It is not something we are born with. If you also think that a few stereotypes will somehow save the situation, you are wrong. Women and men are human beings, but they act a little different from each other. And understanding how they act is, in practice, understanding how to reach them with your argument. Therefore, stop thinking that this is natural. Stop thinking of relationships and sex as something instinctive. Stop thinking that being guided only by instinct and feelings will allow you to create a lasting relationship, because it won't. The fourth myth is that the relationship is there to satisfy your needs on a more regular basis. If you believe something like that, you start looking at the other person only through the lens of your needs. That is, you enter a relationship with the attitude that this person will meet your needs for love, care, nurturing, sex, that he or she will help you cope with feeling lonely, give you security, money, or something else you need. It's not even a relationship. It's a business transaction. You don't see your partner as a living, independent person. Instead, you see a partner saddled with everything you need and everything that will be yours if you force her to sell it all to you for a little of what you want to give her. Ideally, you wouldn't have to give too much of yourself, because then the benefits would be even greater for you. Bargaining never ends in such a relationship. It's using the other person. You can't call it love. You can't build a real relationship with the other person this way because you don't see him. You only see what you can get from him. Nothing else. The fifth myth is about love and our understanding of love. Maybe you think, like most viewers of romantic movies, that love is this mystical connection that requires no words to understand each other. It seems then that all you have to do is look at the person and they should immediately understand what you want from them, what you want and what you mean. This is that soul connection that words could only destroy. You feel that adding a bit of logic, a bit of knowledge and skill to this mystical thing that is love would destroy this mysterious, magical connection between you. Maybe as a result, you think you should always follow your feelings, and you feel reluctant to apply a little understanding of what is really going on here. What are the consequences of this approach? First, constantly following your feelings and instincts will make you make a ton of mistakes. Secondly, this idea of communication without words will cause a mass of conflicts in the long run, because in practice you expect the other person to read your mind. This is a bit too much of an expectation, and often instead of this mystical soul connection because of this expectation, we have to deal with growing anger and frustration, because somehow your partner is not able to read your mind. This is simply impossible in the long run. Your partner may even want to give you what you expect from him, but you don't give him the chance to do so because you don't communicate with him as a human being. This skill is essential if the relationship was to last. All you need to do is change the form of communication. Expecting your partner to read your mind in response to normal verbal communication is impossible, especially in crisis situations. Only an open, magnanimous interpretation of what your partner does or doesn't do and communicating with him respectfully will give him a chance to understand what you want from him and willingly give it to you. Such communication is an acquired skill and not something natural. It doesn't happen under the influence of feelings. Another myth is that once you have a partner, you should sacrifice your life and your passions for the sake of the relationship. That is, you should give up all your passions, everything. In short, you should stop being yourself and preferably spend 24 hours a day with your partner. Otherwise, it's not love. When you glue yourself to another person like that and try to glue that person to yourself so that he can barely breathe, you are asking for trouble yourself. Neither you nor your partner should give up what has been important to you so far. At least not completely. Even if it were to be your Lego collection at the age of 50, don't give it up, because that's the kiss of death for the relationship. Even though the opposite seems to be true. You should never do that. You should have your passions and interests. This is something that makes you who you are, and your partner who he is. Requiring you to sacrifice this will translate into resentment towards yourself and your partner over time. You need to have a life outside the relationship, your life purpose, your passion. If your passion outside the relationship is weightlifting, rock climbing, or mountain biking, don't give it up completely just because you are in a relationship with someone. Continue to be yourself. If your passion is running, watching Star Wars, eating healthy food, studying coral reefs, or volunteering at a shelter, don't give it up. Regardless of your gender, this will keep you mentally healthy and ensure that instead of feeling like you're losing something and sacrificing yourself for the relationship, you can give more of yourself in the relationship and get a piece of the other person's unknown world naturally. In this way, you can grow together. Of course, this doesn't exclude sometimes sitting on the couch and holding hands all day, for example, for rest. What's the problem with all these myths? What is wrong here? Because of this approach to relationships that most people have, which is to think that you are incomplete, that the other person will somehow fill you in and make you happy, that relationships and sex are natural, that as people we understand each other automatically without learning about each other's differences and needs. That love is this mystical force that should never be touched by logic and normal verbal communication, because that somehow diminishes it in our eyes. To be together with the other person, you have to constantly sacrifice your life and your passions. All this leads to trouble in relationships. This is a recipe for disaster. With such beliefs and expectations, your chance of creating a good, lasting relationship equals 0. Take a moment to look at yourself and your approach to relationships through the prism of all these myths. Maybe you believe that you have gaps that only your partner can fill. Maybe you believe that another person will make you happy. Maybe you believe that you should understand each other without words. Maybe you think that using stereotypes like men only think one thing and women talk all the time is true understanding. Believe me or not, but men also have feelings, although they don't always know it, and women to talk more, they have their reasons. The devil is in the details. Therefore, learn about causes, not effects. Learn about differences without valuing, because what you see on the outside is not always what it appears to be. At what point then do you start to build such a good, lasting relationship? Start with yourself. Focus on your own life, on your own mastery, on understanding yourself and your psychology. This may seem paradoxical in a movie about relationships, but this is where it all starts, with a good relationship with yourself. Therefore, focus on yourself. Forget about the idea that someone will make you happy. Become happy before you get into a relationship with someone similarly happy to you. Because when you are happy, you will naturally attract similar people. Unfortunately, it works the same way the other way. That is, when you are unhappy, you will invite the unhappy ones into your life more often. Therefore, work on yourself. Don't let your unhappiness connect you with someone equally unhappy or desperate, because that's what you'll get if you don't take care of it. Being in such a relationship, at some point you will see that no matter how much you care about that person and want to help them to be happy, you are not able to do it. You just can't. You only have power over yourself, but through that power, you can change who you attract into your life. I know this is such a repeated platitude, but really take care of yourself first. Take care of the desperation in your life. Make sure you date people. Not wait until that one special person shows up once every 10 years to stick to them as hard as you can and mess everything up. Forget that relationships are natural. Learn about yourself, about how men and women function. Learn about sex and about relationships. Inject a little logic and a scientific approach into it all. Learn about your partner and teach him about yourself. Help him understand himself by giving him something like an instruction manual in some problematic situations. Don't expect him to naturally always know what needs to be done, but first notice and understand what is important to you. Get to know yourself better. If you do this, it will also be easier for you to understand the other person and the dynamics between you. You will better understand why this person does and says things that you don't understand. Because when you look into it, everything will become clearer to you, and sometimes even obvious. Interpret your partner's behavior graciously and with more gentleness, but never sacrifice self-respect in the process. Forget the idea that you enter a relationship just to get something out of it for yourself. The whole point of a relationship is to go into it to give. If you notice that the other person only takes and doesn't reciprocate anything, what does that tell you? It means that it's not time to hope for a soul connection, but for normal communication. Say what you see, what you feel, and how you want it to change everything between you, without blaming or shouting. Remember that a different kind of communication applies to men and a different kind to women, and respect that difference. Without understanding this difference, you run the risk of not understanding and being understood. Your partner is not a mind reader. Treat love and the relationship as an ever-improving project. Just because you started being together and it worked out, it doesn't mean you don't have to keep trying. This is just the beginning, and for there to be continuity, you need to put continuous work into it. If you don't, then over time you may come to the conclusion that you are actually better off without a partner. Have a life outside the relationship. Don't torment your partner with your constant demands for attention. Have your passion, your friends. Discover and realize your potential. Do what you were doing before the other person came into your life. Be yourself. Also allow space between you to strengthen the bond. Be proud when your partner achieves something, not jealous of it. Be constantly curious about him as a person. Have things in common, similar shared goals, values, solve problems by communicating, and check the quality of your relationship by asking yourself, does this relationship make me happier and healthier on both mental and physical levels? It's not that you expect these things from your partner, but a healthy and good relationship will naturally make you feel good most of the time. If this is not the case, take a look at whether your relationship is built on any of these myths. Is it really a relationship between two people who are happy with each other? If it's not, start there. Take care of your happiness first. At the end of this section, a final summary. The first thing is to understand yourself and your partner. The second is to give and receive naturally. The third is communication for better understanding and conflict resolution. And all this on the invariable basis of working on oneself, one's own fears, one's own doubts, some inner problems and expectations. That is, psychologically, for individual happiness, and then for mutual happiness and well-being. I invite you to the next section. If you liked the material, leave a like and send it to a friend or someone close to you who may benefit from this knowledge. If you want to support our work and help us create more valuable videos, there is a link in the description.